We will start today's class with protection of human rights of women under international laws. So, as you all know that there is a UDHR, that is Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948. So, the United Nations, when it got its existence, so from the very beginning of its inception, it has tried to protect the rights and dignity of women by conferring upon them various human rights and fundamental freedoms. The Article 1 of this Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. It says all human beings. It means it does not discriminate on the basis of gender. Then Article 2 says that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms given in this declaration without distinction of any kind, that is race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. It means these human rights which are granted in Universal of Declaration of Human Rights are very, very universal in nature. It applies to all. It does not matter to which country one belongs to or to which sex, gender or origin one belongs to. So it does not discriminate on the basis of any of the things given in Article 2. Then in 1966, two human rights covenants were adopted. International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And these two covenants reinforce the equality concept that is given in UDHR, and it also forbids discrimination on the ground of sex. So Article 3 of these two covenants that we know by ICCPR and ICESCR, these two also prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex. In 1951, the International Labour Organization, it also adopted a convention concerning equal remuneration for men and women workers for work of equal value. So on the level of labor also, it does not discriminate to which category a person belongs to. For equal kind of work, equal remuneration is to be given. Then in pursuance of Article 16 of the UDHR, that is Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in the 1962, the General Assembly adopted the Convention on Consent to Marriage, Minimum Age for Marriage and Registration of Marriages. The convention tries to ensure equal rights of women and men so far as the marriage is concerned or during the subsistence of marriage and its dissolution. And by the virtue of the principle of consent to marriage, it prohibits the child marriages also. So this international document prohibits child marriages, prescribe age for the marriage for men and women, and it also provides that all the marriages should be registered. Then 1986 Declaration on the Right to Development also specifies that all the states shall cooperate in the realization of human rights and fundamental freedoms for all without any distinction to race, sex, language or the religion. Then comes the year of 1979, which is a landmark in the history of granting of women rights. So convention, I think that most of you may be aware of it, that is Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. That is also known as the Magna Carta or the Bill of Rights for Women. Like there is Magna Carta for the fundamental rights as ensured in our Constitution and world over. Similarly, this particular convention is also termed as Bill of Rights for the Women because it is the most comprehensive instrument for the grant of human rights to women. And India has also ratified this convention on 9th of July 1993. And this convention creates obligation upon the different member states in 7 fields of activity. That is socio-economic, political, cultural, legal, familial and personal. So almost all the aspects of life have been covered under this convention for the grant of human rights. So this CEDAW not only prohibits discrimination in the public life but also in the private life to the extent that it relates to all the family relations as well as to family personal relations. Then in June 1993, a World Conference was held in Vienna, Austria, which again reaffirmed the women rights of women, and it also termed women rights as human rights. The United Nations in 1993 December adopted another very important declaration which for the very first time defined the violence against women, that is known by the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women. So there are two important conventions, one CEDAW, that is Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and secondly a Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women. And this particular convention of 1993 not only defines what constitutes violence against women, but it also outlines actions that is to be taken by the government and communities to prevent such acts of violence against women. So let us see that how this convention defines the term violence. A very exhaustive definition has been given. It says that any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether occurring in public life or in private life. So now let us see that how different women right activists have contributed to the growth of women's right at the international level. So various women rights advocates have long been arguing for the gender equality, and they said that it should be recognized as a human right. But for a very long time, this particular aspect was neglected because there was difference of opinion among two groups. One group wanted to emphasize more upon the abolition of slavery that was very much in vogue in olden times. And some of the advocates emphasized for the equality rights and human rights of women. So there was a kind of contention that which right is more important. So during the infancy of the American feminist movement of the 1830s, those who believed in the abolition of slavery and those who believed in the women's rights, they fought over the issue that what kind of rights should be recognized for the women and the slaves. So like the women feminists wanted to have the right to vote, access to educational opportunities, they wanted to have the right to property, and they also argued that women's rights should be recognized as a human right. But there were certain persons who were more eager to emphasize upon the agenda of abolition of slavery. And they said that it is more important to abolish the slavery and it should be a matter of human rights rather than going for the human rights of women. Because women are also not less than a slave. So some women such as Catherine Beecher, who was an educationist, she argued that women are deprived of their rights because of their morality and not humanity. Because in the nature they are uniquely positioned to enlighten men. And she also said that the roles of women in public life should not extend into equality in the home. It means the rights may be granted to the women in the public life, but at the domestic level, the women should be given preference over the other gender. Because by nature, women are superior to men. But in response to this thought, women right advocate Angelina Grimke wrote that I recognize no rights but human rights, and emphasizing upon the fact that a society that do not give women power or a political voice, it violates their innate human rights. And this Angelina Grimke was one of the group of the women who invoked this idea of women rights as human rights throughout the 19th century. Then this agenda of human rights of women again resurfaced in 1970s, and when came the second wave of feminists. They believed that women should have access to full societal and legal rights, and they also attempted to put the women's rights on the international agenda. And in many, though the feminist movement was going on, and there were different groups of feminists. There were some radical feminist group, there were some liberal feminist group. So they differed on the issues of the grant of human rights. So in many countries of the world, there was no consensus that what kind of right a woman should be granted. Whether they should have the right to equal partnership in marriage, whether they should have power over their finances, whether they should be given equal opportunity for education, or their life should be free from sexual assault or the harassment. So going further, between 1975 and 1995, the United Nations has convened 4 landmark conferences which made gender parity a global priority. So for the first time in 1975, International Women's Year was celebrated, and the first World Conference was held in Mexico City. Later on, 2 other World United Nations conferences were held in 1980 at Copenhagen and in 1985 at Nairobi. And the last 4th conference that was held was in Beijing. That is known as 4th World Conference. That was held in Beijing, China in September 1995. So the first conference, which was held in Mexico in 1975, it recognized the women's right to equality. And 89 of the 133 member nations that participated in this conference, they adopted a framework to help women gain equal access to all facets of society. Though several nations also abstained from it, and even the United States also opposed this framework to help women to gain the equal rights. Then in 1980, a follow-up conference was held in Copenhagen, and it called for stronger protection for women, with an emphasis on property ownership, child custody, and restructuring of inheritance laws. Then a third World Conference, which was held in Nairobi in 1985, it called attention to violence against women. So different conferences were having the different aspect for the emphasis. So this particular conference of Nairobi talked about the violence against women. But though these conferences brought women issues to the international stage, but each one of it fell short because of the lack of consciousness and because of the failure to implement the adopted platforms, that how the things will be carried out. Then comes the very important year of 1995, where global women leaders agreed that it was a time to create an action plan to guarantee equality for women. And in this Beijing conference, which was held in China in 1995, First Lady of United States, Hillary Clinton, propelled the idea into the mainstream that women rights are human rights. So the phrase, which was first used in 1980s and early 1990s, it became very, very prominent after Hillary Clinton pointed out a lot of cases and the facts of violence which were happening all over the world, and on this platform various countries had participated and India has also sent a representative there. So this was a very, very landmark conference, and in her speech Hillary Clinton cited a number of cases of violence which were taken against women, like that of rape, female genital mutilation, dowry burnings, domestic violence, etc. And she labeled these as the human rights violations. And she also criticized those member states who were forcibly sterilizing women and restricting the civil liberties of the women. So after the step taken at the Beijing World Conference and by the addressing of World Conference by the US First Lady, this idea now became synonymous that women rights are the human rights, and now both these are used as synonymous in the mainstream. Then on September 15, 1995, all the countries which gathered at the World Conference at Beijing, they unanimously adopted a Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. So this not only laid down the principles on which the women's rights will be talked about, but also laid down various techniques, various implementation plan that how these women's rights will be guaranteed. And it emphasized upon the 12 areas, including education, health, economic participation and the environment, and said that there is a need of urgent international action on these issues. So this particular Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action of 1995 still governs even today in 2022 the global agenda for women issues, and is credited with helping narrowing the education gap on the basis of gender. It improves maternal health and endeavors to reduce the violence against women. So this particular World Conference, that is the 4th World Conference, has helped to elevate the idea that modern feminism and international effort is to achieve the gender parity. So let us see that what are those 12 critical areas of concern of this Beijing conference. Number 1 is women and poverty. So in a nutshell, we will be talking about it. When women are poor, their rights are not protected and they face double discrimination on account of their gender and economic situation. And because of this poverty and poor economic status, not only the women suffer, but their families suffer, communities, and as well as the economy of the nation. And for this, the United Nations today, and in the past also, it has run various programs to provide training to the women, loans, practical skill to empower the women so that they may economically empower themselves. And the United Nations has also worked a lot to strengthen the social services and to increase the awareness of women's rights. Then second area of emphasis has been education. So education is, we all know that it is very, very important because it is concomitant to all other rights. Because if we are not educated, we can't be aware of other rights that have been made available to us, either at the international level or at the national level. So in order to gain the gender equality and to become the leaders of change, education of women is very, very important. So today if we see, though the education level of women has increased, but still the gap remains, because still there we are witnessing the dropout cases from the schools and the university education. And here I would like to share one incident that last year only one of our LLM student dropped from the course just because of her marriage, because her maternal family didn't allow for the further education. So still though the women are educated, they are highly aware, but still there are gender gaps so far as education is concerned. So if a woman is educated, she may benefit the entire societies, contributing to economies, improved health, nutrition, and also education for the families. Because it is said that when a woman is educated, the whole of the civilization is educated. So if you educate the woman, you educate the whole family. So that kind of saying is there. So the education of a woman is very, very important. So education and the vocational trainings are the tools to help change the harmful gender stereotypes. Because in our society still there are gender stereotypes that how a man should behave, how women should behave, that kind of gender stereotype are still existing in our society. So we have to come out of that and try to focus on the educating the women. So United Nations also promotes women right to education in all the fields. It supports all the educational programs of member states to promote gender equality and women rights. It is trying to revise the formal school curriculum and the policies. And it is also helping to train teachers, students, and the parents. Then the third area of emphasis is women and health. Women need to be healthy in order to realize their full potential. This includes proper nutrition, sexual and reproductive rights, and mental health also, as well as freedom from violence. Because if the life of a woman is fraught with violence, then she cannot concentrate either on her education or on her vocation. So it must be ensured that her life is free from violence, and this violence also affects not only the physical health but also the mental and the psychological health. So United Nations Women advocates for states to better coordinate the provisions of health services for women and girls, including services for the survivors of violence. And it also supports non-governmental partners providing the essential services. The United Nations Women also help to end practices that bring danger to women and girls, including child marriage, female genital cutting, dietary restrictions, and others. It tries to ensure that women's needs are met during medical humanitarian crisis and support and empower women even living with HIV and AIDS. So all kinds of women need to be helped in respect of their health, whether they are in war situation or whether in peacetime. Then fourth area of emphasis is violence against women. So ending violence against women has been the prime most United Nations Women concern. It is one of the key priorities, because violence hurts women and girls and hamper their ability to progress in multiple ways. And since the Beijing conference was held, at least historic 2/3 of the countries have enacted the laws to stop the domestic violence. In India also in 2005, Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act has been enacted in furtherance of this international agenda only. So though the laws have been enacted to protect the women from the violence, but still there are problems at the level of implementation, and women are also not able to access to essential services because of their poor economic situations or because of the gender biasness which is still existing in the society. So United Nations Women advocates for the laws and help guide policies and action plans for long-term means to stop the violence against women by addressing its root causes. So in further future lectures, we will be analyzing in detail that how the things have been taken up at the national level in furtherance of this international bindings. Now the fifth area has been women and armed conflict. So this war and armed conflict also destroy the families and societies and leave women and girls particularly in vulnerable situation. Because in recent times you must have been witnessing the cases which were held in Taliban, how the women rights are being negated in Syria also. So whatever this kind of problem is existing. So these war-like situations is putting women in vulnerable situation. And during the war time, what is the tragic point is that sexual violence is very, very widespread, and it has been used as a war tactic. So United Nations Program on Women, Peace and Security engage women in all the aspects of negotiations, peace building and reconstruction to build inclusive societies. It also trains the peacekeepers to detect, address and stop conflict-related sexual violence. And it also supports the reform of justice and security institutions which may ensure the public services. And these have been very, very responsive to women needs. Now come to the third area of emphasis, that is women and the economy. So whether in businesses or at farms or as entrepreneurs or as employees or through the unpaid domestic care work at the home, women make a lot of contribution to the economy of the nation. So gender discrimination means women are often ending up in insecure, low-wage jobs and constitute a small minority in various senior positions. If we see that how many heads of states are there, how many Supreme Court judges are there, how many prime ministers and presidents have been there, or how many vice chancellors have been there as women, so we find that still women are not there at the senior positions. So in order to ensure that women can contribute fully and benefit from the economy, United Nations of Women runs, there is a separate wing at the United Nations that is known as United Nations Women, and it has its own website also. So UN Women runs various programs for the economic empowerment of the women. It promotes the women's ability to secure the decent jobs, own the land and accumulate the assets, and influences institutions and public policies determining growth and development. It also works with partners to ensure that workplaces are free of violence and sexual harassment. And because of that only, under this international agenda, we have the Act of Prohibition of Sexual Harassment at Workplace of 2013. Now coming to the seventh agenda, that has been the Women in Power and Decision Making. Once a woman is in a leadership role, she can make a lot of difference. But still they are underrepresented as voters and in top positions, whether in elected offices, whether in civil service, corporate boardrooms or in academia. So United Nations advocate for women's fair access to decision making. And for this, it is running the program on leadership and participation, which provides training to women and help build their skill and ensure that even in elections, the women's rights are protected. And if they are participating as a candidate in elections, so their candidature is free from any kind of violence. Or the campaign which is going on, it should also be ensured that there is no violence take place against women. So through the Fund for Gender Equality, the United Nations Women has supported the grassroots level women and help them to raise their voice at higher level on various issues affecting women. Now, another agenda talked about the institutional mechanisms. So, specialized institutions have played a very, very important part in informing laws, policies, and programs and have advanced the gender equality. So, like we have the institutions of National Human Rights Commission, National Commission of Women. So, these commissions have been set up under this international promises to secure the women's human rights. So, if the laws and policies are very, very robust and their implementation mechanism is also very, very strong, then it can ensure the women rights in a better way. So, United Nations Women works with government to develop informed national action plans. It ensures gender responsive budgeting and strengthen coordination among diverse stakeholders for sustained and meaningful action. It associates with governments, United Nations agencies, civil society organizations, and other institutions to go for the capacity building of women and to increase the awareness level. So, various institutions mechanisms have been incorporated by the United Nations Women, which are ensuring the human rights to women in various aspects of life. So, ninth agenda is very, very important, that is human rights of women. So, women and girls are entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of all of their human rights. The Beijing Platform of Action confirms that protection and promotion of human rights is the first responsibility of government and core to the work of United Nations. And this United Nations Women provides technical assistance to ensure that states create national laws, policies and plans to ensure women's rights and protect them against violations. So, this human rights agenda of United Nations promotes international treaties, like we have this Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination and All Forms of Violence Against Women. And through this, international bodies are lobbying together at the level of decision making to ensure that in all the member nations, adequate laws are passed and women human rights are ensured. And for this purpose is also providing the training and education, not only to the people in general or the common human beings, but also for the persons who are holding the offices of justice. For them also it is running the training programs. Then 10th agenda has been women and the media. We all know that media plays a very, very important part in perpetuating as well as in challenging the social norms that not only condones discrimination but also condones violence against women. So, media has both kind of role to play, or it is playing positive role as well as somewhere it is putting the women on the negative aspect also, because we witness that what kind of advertisements are running on the media and what kind of serials are going on. So sometimes what happens, this media objectify women, but at the same time it is also showcasing strong women leaders and protagonists who can become role models for their audience. The United Nations Women collaborates with media so that it may become a very, very key agent in advancing the women's rights. And apart from working with the media to facilitate the in-depth coverage on women's rights, it also takes upon the research on the portrayal of women in news media as well as in the entertainment industry. So media has a very, very important role to play if the human rights of women's situation is to be improved. And United Nations Women has also been conducting various workshops and training programs for the journalists also at the global level to encourage the gender sensitive reporting. Then the 11th area of concern has been women and environment. So women are among the most affected by climate change. They are often the one who have been involved in gathering the water. You must have witnessed the scene that women are fetching the water from far off places where there is scarcity of water or where the water level has gone down. So basically we have seen that who are in the line to get water, these are the women only. For the purpose of fishing and farming, which is being affected by flooding, it somewhere also affects the status of the women. So women voices have been ignored so far as the environmental planning and the management is concerned. And regarding their access to land and productive resources also need to be improved a lot. So United Nations Women seeks to ensure that women are involved in environmental decision making at all levels, integrating their concern in policies and programs, and establishing ways to assess the impact of development and environmental policies on women. United Nations Women also take part in international fora, following negotiations and maintaining active outreach to ensure that the decisions incorporate references to gender equality, women rights, and women contribution in climate change, mitigation and adaptation. Then last area has been the girl child. So we know that specific forms of violence and harmful practices like female genital mutilation and cutting, child marriage, particularly affects the women's status of education and employment later on. And there has been a lot of child sexual violence also. So this is a very, very grey area where the girl child are being subjected to violence. One, there is female feticide, there is infanticide, and there is sexual assault and sexual abuse also. And not only by the strangers, but by their own family members, that we know by the name of incest, where the family members or the neighborhood society is also indulging against sexual assault or violence against girl child. So United Nations Women works to empower girls and young women to pursue their dreams, confront discrimination, and prevent violation of all kinds. So we are celebrating the International Women's Day. We are celebrating International Child Day. We are also celebrating the National Girl Child Day, and other such kinds of events are being celebrated, like the present program of Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao. All this in furtherance of this global agenda only. So United Nations Women raise awareness of girls' rights, support programs that work with educators, parents and fathers in particular, and also along with the religious leaders. Because we know that religion plays a very, very important role in running the society. So how the religion can be used in a positive way to enhance the status of women and to grant their human rights. So to advance the girls' education, health and well-being, it advocates with government and other partners is striving for a world where girls can live free from fear, violence and discrimination. So these have been these 12 areas of concern which were taken up in the Beijing conference in 1995. And every 5 years, after the 1995, every 5 years, United Nations Women celebrates Declaration of Beijing and Platform for Action. And in 2020 also, the Beijing celebrated, and it is known as Beijing plus 5. So there has been Beijing plus 5, Beijing plus 10, Beijing plus 15, Beijing plus 20, and current one has been Beijing plus 25. So when you will be visiting the website of UN Women, you will find in detail that how this different Beijing plus conferences which are emphasizing the human rights of women are working. So for today, I think this much is enough, and further we will be discussing about the Commission on the Status of Women. That is also a United Nations body, that how it has worked in the area of human rights of women. So if now you have any